If your car gets stolen, the police can track it down using the vehicle identification number, right?
Right, the VIN.
Yeah, that VIN is stamped directly onto the metal. But imagine if we applied that exact same logic, not to cars, but to the industrial machines that cartels use to manufacture counterfeit pills.
Oh, that is such an interesting way to frame it.
Right, like what if the government started mandating serial numbers on drug-making equipment?
It completely flips the approach. I mean, instead of just chasing the illegal substances once they are on the street, you are actively choking off the hardware required to make them in the first place.
Welcome to this deep dive for Congress in context. If you are joining us today, our goal is to help you, the everyday American, make sense of what is actually happening in Washington right now.
And we try to do that without drowning you in information overload.
Exactly. We are looking past the political noise to understand how legislation directly impacts your daily life. And before we really get going, just a quick casual housekeeping note.
Yeah, always important.
Right, so this deep dive is a completely independent civic education project. If you find this kind of breakdown valuable, you can support our production infrastructure by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link right down there in your app's show notes.
We really appreciate it. And looking at the agenda this week, well, there's a fascinating theme emerging.
Yeah, what are we getting into today?
So we are going to explore how Congress is attempting to force hidden, opaque systems completely out of the shadows.
Okay.
We are talking about the illicit drug supply chain, secret hospital billing practices, and the massive hidden energy costs of artificial intelligence.
Wow, that is a huge lineup. And we will also pull back the curtain on how the House actually functions, right? Looking at everything from a legislative session that lasted exactly 2 minutes to the very real dollar amount spent on congressional diplomatic travel.
It is a packed agenda, and it's all heavily grounded in the congressional record from Saturday, July 18, 2026, plus a massive stack of bill summaries set for committee markups starting Monday, July 20.
All right, let's jump right in. The House Energy and Commerce Committee has a major markup session scheduled, and a big chunk of their focus is squarely on the opioid and fentanyl crisis.
Yeah, but they aren't just taking a broad brush to it.
Not at all.
No, they are getting incredibly specific. They're targeting exact chemical compounds and, like you hinted at in the intro, the physical tools of distribution.
Right, so let's look at the Combating Illicit Xylazine Act. This bill officially moves Xylazine to Schedule 3rd under the Controlled Substances Act.
Right.
But wait, it also includes a specific exemption for veterinary use. Why carve out an exemption if the drug is causing so much harm on the streets?
Well, because context is everything here. Xylazine, which is often called tranq on the street, is fundamentally a powerful animal tranquilizer.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it is heavily relied upon by farmers and veterinarians globally, like for large animals, horses and cattle.
Gotcha.
So, by placing it on Schedule 3rd, they are acknowledging that it has a recognized, highly regulated medical use. Schedule 3 basically means it has a moderate to low potential for physical and psychological dependence compared to harder drugs, but it still requires strict oversight.
Got it. So they are trying to lock down the human supply chain without destroying the agricultural industry in the process.
Exactly.
Now, compare that to the Stop Nitazines Act. That bill permanently places nitazines onto Schedule 1.
Right, and Schedule 1 is the most restrictive category.
Meaning a total ban, basically.
Pretty much. It means the federal government has determined the substance has a high potential for abuse and absolutely no currently accepted medical use in treatment.
Okay, and what are nitazines exactly?
Well, nitazines are a class of synthetic opioids that can actually be vastly more potent than fentanyl. So the approach there is a total lockdown.
Wow, worse than fentanyl. That is terrifying. And it seems like Congress is acknowledging that legislation alone won't stop the immediate bleeding on the ground.
Yeah, that is where the Alert Communities Act comes in.
Right, which focuses on funding and distributing fentanyl and xylazine test strips to first responders and community organizations.
Exactly. So they are tackling the regulation, but also trying to give people a way to test if a supply is adulterated in real time.
It is kind of a dual approach.
Yeah, that is the reality of harm reduction entering the legislative framework.
Yeah.
But let's circle back to that idea you opened the show with.
The VIN numbers.
Yes, the VIN numbers, because this is where the approach gets highly inventive.
This stood out to me so much. There are two bills working together here, the Fight Illicit Pill Presses Act and the Press Act.
Right.
So if I understand this correctly, instead of just regulating the chemical powders, they are going after the heavy machinery.
That is exactly right.
They want to require serial numbers on tableting and encapsulating machines.
Yes, because cartels and illicit operations rely on these massive industrial-grade pill presses to churn out millions of counterfeit prescription drugs.
Sure, they can't do it by hand.
Right, so by mandating that regulated persons identify these tableting machines and their critical parts with a permanent serial number, they change the game.
And they are increasing the penalties for altering or removing those numbers, right?
Yes, significantly increasing them. Congress is basically creating a visible, trackable supply chain for the hardware itself.
So it literally is like a VIN for a drug press. If law enforcement raids a warehouse and finds one of these machines, they can trace exactly who manufactured it.
Yep. Who bought it,
Yeah.
and where the chain of custody broke down.
That makes a lot of sense.
It really is a completely different lever to pull. I mean, you are bottlenecking the physical production rather than just policing the final product.
Okay, keeping with this theme of forcing hidden things into the light, let's pivot to the healthcare bills coming out of that same committee.
Oh, absolutely. This is a big one.
Because if there is one thing that feels entirely hidden from the average person, it is how hospitals calculate their bills.
Healthcare pricing is notoriously opaque. I mean, you often have no idea what a procedure costs until weeks after it happens.
Right, when the bill just randomly arrives in your mailbox.
Exactly. Which brings us to the Prices on the Wall Act and its companion, the Lower Costs, More Transparency Act.
And the goal here is to require hospitals and ambulatory surgical centers and imaging providers to actually post their discounted cash prices for shoppable services by January 1st, 2028.
Right, to put it all out in the open.
But my question is this. We have seen transparency pushes before, and hospitals often just ignore them because the fines are basically pocket change. How is this any different?
Well, this time, they're introducing enforcement mechanisms with real teeth.
Okay.
Under the Lower Costs, More Transparency Act, there is a standardized format mandated for these public prices. And if a hospital fails to comply, they face civil monetary penalties.
How much are we talking about?
For a small hospital, the penalty is $300 a day.
That still feels like pocket change.
But for large hospitals, the penalty can scale up to $12.50 per bed, per day.
Wait, hold on. Let me do the math on that. If you are a massive, say, 1,000-bed hospital system and you refuse to post your prices, you are getting hit with a $12,500 fine every single day.
Yes. Over a year, that is millions of dollars.
Wow.
It fundamentally changes the financial calculus. It becomes significantly more expensive to hide your prices than to simply publish them.
That is a massive shift. And it is not just the prices they want to expose, right? There is also the Prior Authorization Accountability Act.
Yes, and this one takes aim at health insurance plans.
Right. Prior authorization is the process where your doctor says you need a certain treatment, but the insurance company has to approve it before they cover it.
Exactly. It is a huge pain point for a lot of patients.
So what does this new bill do?
It requires health plans to publish their claim denial rates online, along with the average time it takes them to make a decision.
Wow. So you actually get to see if an insurance company has a habit of automatically saying no to everything. And you get to see that before you sign up for their plan.
Exactly. It attempts to correct a massive data asymmetry. By forcing health plans to publicly display the percentage of requests they approve versus deny, the legislation shifts information power directly back to you, the consumer.
It is all about exposure. Exposing the drug presses, exposing the hospital prices, exposing the insurance denials.
It is a very consistent theme.
Which brings us perfectly to our next major topic. We often think of the digital world, specifically artificial intelligence, as this invisible thing floating up in the cloud.
Right, like it doesn't physically exist.
Exactly. But AI requires a massive amount of physical infrastructure, and the Energy and Commerce Committee is getting very worried about the U.S. power grid.
The physical reality of our digital infrastructure is becoming impossible to ignore.
Because of the power draw.
Yeah, training and running advanced AI models requires an immense amount of electricity, far more than traditional computing.
Let's look at the Protecting Families from AI Data Center Energy Costs Act. The core directive of this bill is to have the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, hold a technical conference.
Right.
And their explicit goal is to figure out how to shield residential ratepayers, you and me, from the costs associated with these massive new AI data centers.
See, when a major tech company builds a new data center, the local utility often has to build new transmission lines.
Right.
Or even new power plants just to handle that specific demand. And historically, the cost of those massive grid upgrades gets distributed across everyone's monthly electric bill, including residential homes.
Wait, so if a trillion-dollar tech company builds a server farm in my county,
Your electric bill goes up to pay for their power lines.
that is the exact scenario this legislation is trying to prevent.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's look at the companion bill, the Ratepayer Protection Act. How does this legislation actually define who is responsible, and how does it shift that financial burden away from regular families?
Well, the bill creates a very specific category called a large load customer.
Okay.
It defines this as a non-residential facility that requires an aggregate peak electric demand of 100 megawatts or more at a single site.
For context, how much is 100 megawatts?
It is roughly enough electricity to power tens of thousands of homes simultaneously.
Holy cow, that is huge.
It is a massive concentrated draw on the grid. So the Ratepayer Protection Act requires electric utilities to design their rates so that these 100 megawatt large load customers pay the full incremental cost of the upgrades necessary to serve them.
Meaning the tech company pays for their own power lines.
Correct. And the bill even goes a step further. It requires financial assurances.
What does that mean in practice?
So if the tech company builds the data center, forces the utility to build a new power plant, and then suddenly terminates its contract 3 years later, the everyday ratepayers aren't left holding the bag.
So they aren't stuck paying for a multi-million-dollar power plant that was built exclusively for a facility that no longer exists.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. But what is interesting to me is that Congress isn't just treating AI like a parasite on the grid. They're also looking at how AI can actually fix some of our oldest energy problems.
Yeah, there's a flip side to this.
Right. There's a bill called the Affordable Innovation for the Grid Act.
This is that flip side of the coin. Right now, there is a massive backlog in what is called the interconnection queue.
The interconnection queue.
Yeah. If you want to build a new solar farm or wind farm and connect it to the national grid, engineers have to conduct incredibly complex studies. They have to ensure that adding your new power won't destabilize the whole system.
And I imagine doing that by hand or with older software takes forever.
It can take years.
Yeah.
Literally, projects just sit in limbo.
Wow.
So the Affordable Innovation for the Grid Act directs the Secretary of Energy to assess how we can use AI and high-performance computing to expedite those exact generator interconnection studies.
That is fascinating. So if AI can process the engineering data safely and faster, it literally accelerates the modernization of our entire energy grid. So they want to regulate the energy that AI consumes while deploying AI to optimize the energy we produce. It is a really delicate balancing act.
It really is.
Now, I want to take a hard right turn here. We've talked a lot about the bills being debated, but I want to talk about how the House of Representatives is actually operating this week.
Oh, process insights, always a good topic.
Because looking at the congressional record from Saturday, July 18th, 2026, there are some fascinating quirks in how our government functions.
For sure. And just to note, Saturday sessions are rare enough to begin with, which makes them procedurally interesting to watch.
Right. So according to the record, the House met at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Speaker pro tempore Michael K. Simpson was presiding. They did a prayer, they recited the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the House adjourned at exactly 10:02 a.m.
Yeah.
A 2-minute legislative session. What is the point of that?
What you are looking at is called a Pro-Forma session. Pro-Forma is a Latin phrase meaning as a matter of form. The Constitution strictly dictates that neither Chamber of Congress, the House, or the Senate can adjourn for more than 3 days without the explicit consent of the other chamber.
So even if they have no actual votes scheduled and everyone has basically gone home for the weekend, they have to physically open the room and gavel in just to reset the 3-day clock.
Exactly. It fulfills that constitutional meeting requirement. But there's also a deeper strategic reason for these brief sessions.
There always is.
Right. Holding a pro forma session prevents Congress from officially entering a prolonged recess.
And why does it matter?
Because that is a tactic frequently used by both parties to prevent the President of the United States from making recess appointments. Those can only legally occur if the Senate is in a formal, extended recess.
That is fascinating. It's a 2-minute procedural loophole designed to maintain the balance of power between the legislative and executive branches.
Yeah. The rules of the House are incredibly complex, and how they are leveraged tells you a lot about the current political dynamics.
Speaking of leveraging rules, there was another rare procedural tool that showed up in Saturday's record, a discharge petition. Specifically, petition number 24, led by Representative Raskin. On July 18th, a massive wave of signatures hit this petition, including heavy hitters like Representatives Pelosi, Himes, and Clyburn. Can you explain what a discharge petition actually does? Because it sounds aggressive.
It is one of the most powerful tools available to rank-and-file members, but it is very difficult to execute.
Okay, how does it work?
So in the normal legislative process, a bill is assigned to a committee. The committee chairman holds immense power. If they refuse to hold a vote on a bill, it is effectively dead. It cannot reach the House floor.
So if a chairman doesn't like your bill, it just sits in a drawer forever?
Precisely.
Yeah.
But a discharge petition bypasses that committee entirely.
Really?
Yeah. If a member can gather the physical signatures of a simple majority of the entire House, which requires 218 members, the bill is forcefully discharged from the committee's control and brought directly to the floor for a full vote.
Wow. So it is essentially a mutiny against the committee leadership.
You could frame it that way. It is a vital tool for the minority party or for a bipartisan coalition to override the leadership's control of the agenda.
Especially if they know a bill has widespread support but is being blocked by a single chairman.
Exactly. But gathering 218 signatures is difficult, which is why it is notable when one starts gaining serious momentum in the record.
Okay, let's look at one more item from the record that deals with transparency. The Q2 official foreign travel expenditure reports were published this week.
Right.
These documents list the exact dollar amounts used for congressional, diplomatic, and fact-finding travel.
And when people see these numbers, they can sometimes cause sticker shock, particularly because they factor in military air transportation and complex logistics in foreign countries.
Definitely. For instance, the report details a delegation trip to South Korea, which included several staff members, that utilized over $112,000. Meanwhile, a large bipartisan delegation to Lithuania utilized over $119,000. Why are these published so publicly? Is it just a naming and shaming exercise?
Not at all. It is actually a legal transparency requirement mandated by Public Law 95-384.
Okay.
Members of Congress and their staff are required to travel internationally for national security oversight, diplomatic engagements, and committee fact-finding missions.
Yeah.
Doing that securely, well, it often requires military planes, translators, and security details. It is expensive.
Right. That makes sense.
The publication of these exact figures in the congressional record ensures that citizens can track precisely how public funds are allocated for international work.
It is raw data visibility. You can look it up and see the per diem cost, the transportation cost, right down to the dollar. It is actually pretty remarkable that we have that level of access.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of access in public funds, the federal budget.
Right. Looking ahead to Monday, July 20, the House Rules Committee is taking up a resolution, HCon Res 113.
Yeah.
This is the resolution that establishes the congressional budget for the U.S. government for fiscal year 2027, and it sets spending limits all the way through 2036.
So the budget resolution is essentially the overarching macroeconomic blueprint.
Right.
It does not actually authorize the spending of a single dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it sets the spending limits and revenue targets that the various appropriations committees have to follow when they write the actual funding bills.
But writing those bills takes time, which is why we are also seeing the introduction of a new bill making continuing appropriations for fiscal year 2027.
Exactly.
We hear the phrase continuing resolution or CR all the time in the news, usually right before a government shutdown. How does a CR actually work?
Think of the budget resolution as drawing up the blueprints for a new house. The continuing resolution is the stopgap funding that keeps your current lights on while the architects finish drawing.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. If Congress cannot finalize the new budget by the end of the fiscal year, a CR simply extends the previous year's funding levels for a set period of time. It prevents federal agencies from shutting down completely while negotiations continue.
Okay, so they are basically buying time. And alongside the massive federal budget, Congress is also taking aim at the money flowing into political campaigns. We have two newly introduced bills.
Yeah, H.R. 9771 and 9772.
Right. One imposes penalties on political committees that accept foreign contributions, and another requires tax-exempt organizations to disclose foreign contributions.
You know, if you look at the entirety of what we have discussed today, a very clear pattern emerges across completely different sectors of society.
It all comes back to forcing the hidden stuff into the public view.
Exactly. Whether Congress is demanding cost transparency from massive hospital networks, forcing tech companies to take financial responsibility for the power grid, or requiring strict disclosures of foreign money in political organizing, the underlying goal is identical.
They are trying to pull opaque financial systems into the light where they can be regulated and scrutinized.
100%.
From serial numbers on illicit pill presses to your local electric bill, it is all connected. Well, that brings us to our closing segment on citizen engagement and support.
Our favorite part.
Truly, we want to express our profound gratitude to you for dedicating your time to civic education. Taking the time to understand how these policies actually work is the foundation of staying informed and empowered.
Absolutely.
And if you want to help keep this ad-free, independent resource sustainable, please take just a moment to click the Buy Me a Coffee link right in the episode description.
And as always, we want to leave you with actionable steps. You can find and read the full original text of every piece of legislation we discussed today by visiting congress.gov.
Yeah, whether you want to dig into the Combating It is a Xylazine Act or the Ratepayer Protection Act.
Reading the primary source material is always the best way to understand policy. Furthermore, we highly encourage you to contact your representatives to share your views on these issues.
Keep an eye on the House Energy and Commerce and Rules Committee markups taking place this Monday, July 20. And remember, democracy does not just happen in Washington, D.C. or at the ballot box every 2 years.
That is a great point.
Participating in your local utility board meetings to discuss rate structures or attending hospital community boards to demand pricing transparency are vital ways to engage with the exact policies we broke down today.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Okay.
We constantly talk about the digital world and artificial intelligence as if they are ethereal, invisible concepts existing somewhere out there in the cloud.
Right.
But based on the legislation moving through Congress right now, the future of AI isn't going to be decided in the cloud at all. It is going to be decided by highly physical, intensely tangible realities. Specifically, how much physical copper wire we can string on transmission lines, and who exactly is going to be stuck paying the electric bill.
When you look closely at the future of our digital world, you still find a trail of copper wire, heavy machinery, and very real ledgers. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time on Congress in Context.